The music floated through the ballroom, delicate strands of violin weaving into the low murmur of guests. Crystal chandeliers spilled light over the tables dressed in ivory silk, each centerpiece bursting with white roses and baby's breath. Couples laughed, clinked glasses, and leaned close for photographs. Clara Bennett sat at the farthest table, alone. Her black dress was simple, chosen carefully from her modest budget, and though she had taken extra care with her hair and makeup, she felt invisible among the designer gowns and glittering jewels. She clasped her hands in her lap, willing herself to look content while every part of her longed to leave. It wasn't that she resented her cousin's happiness. Clara was thrilled for her. But weddings were cruel reminders. While others had partners to hold, to dance with, she had only an empty chair beside her and the memory of promises broken long ago. Her ex-husband had left when their daughter, Lily, was barely 2. Now 5 years old, Lily was Clara's entire world. Raising her alone had taught Clara strength she never knew she possessed, but it had also left her with loneliness that she could never admit aloud. She lifted her water glass to her lips just as the room shifted. A ripple of whispers swept through the guests, eyes turning toward the entrance. Clara followed their gaze. A tall man in a midnight blue suit strode into the ballroom, his presence commanding the way a flame drew every gaze in a dark room. His shoulders squared, his jaw set, his very walk spoke of authority. Clara recognized him instantly. Ethan Rhodes, CEO of Rhodes Enterprises. She had seen him in business magazines and financial news segments, a man whispered about as brilliant, ruthless, and untouchable. What was he doing here? The groom had mentioned once that his company had investors, but Clara had never imagined someone like Ethan would attend a family wedding. Before she could look away, Ethan's gaze swept across the room, and landed on her. Her heart stopped. He walked straight toward her corner table. Clara nearly choked on her drink. Surely he wasn't. "Good evening," Ethan said, his voice low and even, carrying a subtle weight that made her shiver. Hello," Clara stammered, trying not to gape. Then, without preamble, he leaned closer. His scent was clean and intoxicating, cedarwood and something darker, like stormy air before rain. His lips tilted toward her ear. "Pretend we're a couple," he whispered. Clara blinked, her mind blank. "What?" He straightened slightly, his expression unreadable. To anyone watching, he looked as if he were simply chatting with her. But his hand brushed hers, firm and steady, anchoring the illusion. "They're watching," he murmured, flicking his eyes toward a table of older men in tuxedos near the front. "Just smile." Clara's pulse thundered. Her instinct screamed that this was absurd. Yet her lips curved automatically into a shaky smile. Ethan slipped into the chair beside her with smooth precision, as though it had been his seat all along. "You're saving me," he said, lifting her untouched champagne flute and raising it slightly, like a toast. "In return, I'll make sure you're not alone tonight." Clara stared at him, bewildered. "Why would you need me to?" "Because every woman in this room is watching me," Ethan cut in, his voice still low enough for her ears only. "And every man over there wants to know if I'm distracted. It helps to appear unavailable." Clara's throat tightened. "So you just picked the first woman you saw sitting alone?" His lips curved faintly. "Not the first. The only one who wasn't trying to get my attention." Heat rushed to her cheeks. She didn't know whether to be flattered or insulted. "This is ridiculous." "Maybe, but you're playing along," he replied smoothly. She wanted to argue, but when her cousin, the bride, spotted them and waved enthusiastically across the room, Clara's words caught in her throat. The bride's face lit up at the sight of her cousin, with someone. Ethan raised his glass in acknowledgement, sealing the charade. Through dinner, Ethan kept the act alive. He leaned close, occasionally touching Clara's hand as if out of habit. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple sharing quiet intimacy. Yet beneath the performance, Clara noticed something startling. Ethan was genuinely listening to her. He asked about her work, a secretary at a small firm. He asked what books she read, what music she liked. He didn't flinch when she mentioned her daughter. In fact, his expression softened. "What's her name?" he asked. "Lily. She's 6. Ethan's lips quirked, almost tender. "Lily. Beautiful." The way he said it stirred something in Clara's chest she hadn't felt in years. Later, when the music swelled and couples filled the dance floor, Ethan turned to her. "Dance with me." Clara froze. "I don't. You've been staring at the floor all evening," he said quietly. "Let me change that." Before she could protest further, his hand closed gently around hers, guiding her toward the floor. The crowd parted instinctively, making space for the CEO who rarely appeared in public outside of boardrooms. Clara's nerves jittered as his hand settled at her waist, the other clasping hers. But when he drew her into the rhythm, her body betrayed her, melting into the steps as though she'd been waiting for this touch. "You're good at this," she whispered. "I don't dance often," he said, a hint of humor in his tone. But with the right partner, his gaze locked onto hers, and Clara felt the room blur. For a moment, it wasn't pretend. For a moment, she was just a woman in the arms of a man who looked at her as if she mattered. But reality tugged at her. This was temporary, a favor, nothing more. When the song ended, applause rippled around them. Clara tried to step back, but Ethan's hand lingered at her waist, his thumb brushing in a way that felt almost reluctant. Back at their table, Clara finally gathered her courage. "Why me, Ethan, really?" He studied her for a long moment, the steel of the CEO softening into something almost vulnerable. "Because you remind me what it's like to be normal. To sit beside someone who isn't calculating what they can take from me." Clara swallowed hard. "I don't belong in your world." "Maybe I don't belong in mine either," he murmured. Her chest tightened. She wanted to dismiss it as another line, but the sincerity in his eyes made it impossible. The night blurred into laughter, whispered confidences, and moments where their hands brushed too long. When the final toast was made and the newlyweds departed under a shower of rose petals, Ethan escorted Clara outside. Cool night air wrapped around them. Clara hugged her shawl tighter, suddenly aware the charade was ending. "Thank you," she said softly, "for keeping me company." Ethan's eyes held hers, unreadable but intense. "You kept me company too." Silence stretched between them, charged and fragile. Then he reached into his pocket, pulling out a sleek black card. He pressed it into her hand. "Call me," he said simply. Clara stared down at the card, her heart racing. "Why?" His lips curved into the faintest smile. "Because I don't think I want this to be pretend." And before she could respond, he was gone, swept into the night like a secret she wasn't sure she was ready to hold. Clara clutched the card against her chest, her heart pounding with a question she hadn't dared to ask in years. Could something this impossible be real? The ballroom shimmered with light. Chandeliers scattered golden warmth over ivory-draped tables, each crowned with roses and flickering candles. Guests laughed, couples leaned close, champagne glasses clinked. Clara Bennett sat at the far edge of the room, alone. Her cousin, the bride, had insisted she come. But as Clara smoothed the skirt of her modest black dress and kept her eyes fixed on the untouched water glass in front of her, she wondered why she had agreed. Everywhere she looked, she saw pairs, married couples, engaged sweethearts, hopeful dates. Everyone had someone at their side. Everyone except her. She told herself it didn't matter. She was used to being alone. Ever since her ex-husband had walked out, leaving her to raise their daughter Lily by herself, Clara had learned how to smile when her chest felt hollow. She had learned to nod politely through conversations, to tuck away the ache of loneliness behind a facade of strength. Still, weddings made it harder to pretend. The low murmur of conversation shifted suddenly, replaced by a ripple of whispers. Clara glanced toward the entrance. A tall man in a midnight blue suit strode into the room, his presence drawing attention like a magnet. Guests straightened, eyes widening, whispers darting across tables. Clara knew that face. She had seen it in financial magazines, in online articles that made him sound more legend than man. Ethan Rhodes, CEO of Rhodes Enterprises. He was rumored to be brilliant, relentless in business, impossibly wealthy. The kind of man who lived in a world far removed from Clara's own. Her pulse quickened as Ethan's gaze scanned the ballroom, and stopped. On her. No, she thought, heat rushing to her cheeks. He can't possibly. But he was already walking toward her. "Good evening," Ethan said, his voice smooth, deep, with the faintest edge of command. Clara blinked up at him, startled. Hello." Then he leaned close, his cologne, cedarwood and something darker, brushing her senses. His words were low, meant for her alone. "Pretend we're a couple." Clara's mouth parted in shock. "What?" "They're watching." His eyes flicked toward a table of tuxedoed men near the front. "Just smile." Before she could protest, he slid into the empty chair beside her, his hand brushing hers. To anyone watching, it looked natural. Intimate. "You're saving me," he murmured, lifting her champagne flute as though toasting her. "And in return, you won't spend this wedding alone." Clara stared at him, utterly bewildered. "You want me to play your girlfriend?" "For tonight," he confirmed. His expression softened briefly, the steel of his CEO mask easing. Trust me, it's mutually beneficial. She should have said no. It was absurd. But when her cousin, the bride, spotted them and beamed across the room, Clara's refusal caught in her throat. Ethan raised his glass, sealing the illusion. Dinner passed in a blur. To her surprise, Ethan didn't just play the role, he asked her questions. Not surface-level pleasantries, but real ones. What do you do for work? Secretary. Small firm. And outside of work, I spend time with my daughter. Lily. She's 6. She loves drawing. Instead of the polite nod she expected, his gaze warmed. Lily. That's beautiful. Clara's heart tightened. No one ever asked about Lily outside of family. No one cared the way this man, this impossibly powerful man, seemed to in that moment. When the music swelled and couples filled the dance floor, Ethan turned to her. Dance with me. Clara shook her head. I don't. You've been staring at the floor all night, he said quietly. Let me change that. Before she could object, his hand closed around hers, firm yet gentle, leading her onto the floor. The crowd parted instinctively, giving space to the enigmatic CEO and his mystery partner. Clara's nerves fluttered as his arms settled at her waist, but when their steps fell into rhythm, something inside her softened. You're good at this, she whispered. I rarely dance, he said, a faint smile tugging his lips. But with the right partner. His gaze locked with hers, and suddenly, the rest of the room disappeared. For a moment, it wasn't pretend. Part 2. The song ended to polite applause, but Clara barely heard it. Ethan's hand lingered at her waist a second too long before he released her. She tried to step back into reality, reminding herself this was all for show, but her heart refused to listen. Back at their table, she finally found her voice. Why me, Ethan? Out of everyone here, why pick me? He studied her, his expression unreadable at first, then softened by something she hadn't expected, honesty. Because you're the only woman in this room who wasn't angling for my attention. Do you know how rare that is? Clara swallowed. I don't belong in your world. Maybe I don't belong in mine either, he murmured. The words shouldn't have mattered. Yet they echoed inside her, stirring emotions she thought she had buried. The rest of the evening blurred. They shared laughter over whispered jokes, brushed hands more often than necessary, and drew curious glances from nearly every guest. Clara tried to remind herself it was all pretend, but the warmth in Ethan's smile when she laughed made it harder to believe. When the bride and groom departed beneath a shower of rose petals, Ethan escorted Clara outside. The night air was cool, scented with rain on distant pavement. This is where the act ends, Clara said softly, hugging her shawl around her shoulders. Ethan turned to her, his gaze steady. Act or not, I enjoyed tonight. More than I expected. Her chest tightened. You don't have to say that. I don't say things I don't mean, he replied. Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out a sleek black card, and pressed it into her hand. Clara looked down at the embossed name. Ethan Rhodes, CEO. A number scrawled in ink across the back. Call me, he said. She blinked. Why? His lips curved, not into the public CEO smirk she had seen in photos, but something smaller. Sincere. Because I don't want this to stay pretend. The words struck her like a tremor, shaking loose fears she had lived with for years. Ethan, she began, but her voice faltered. She thought of Lily, of scraped budgets, school lunches, late nights at work. Could she really let someone like him into that world? As if reading her thoughts, Ethan stepped closer, his tone gentle. I don't know what you've been through, Clara. But I know you're strong. I saw it tonight. Tears pricked her eyes. No one had called her strong in so long. Think about it, Ethan whispered. That's all I ask. Then he was gone, stepping into a waiting car that disappeared down the glittering street. Clara stood frozen beneath the night sky, Ethan's card clutched in her hand, her heart pounding with a question she hadn't dared to ask in years. What if love, real love, was reaching for her again?